foreign-owned corporate structure, political cowardice when it comes to Canadian industry, now actively pushing policies that sideline Canadian workers. This is not the Tim Hortons you grew up with. It's a global brand wearing a Canadian costume, and they think you're too stupid to notice.
Tim Hortons corporate with a series of very serious allegations. Allegations of fraud, mismanagement, coordinated Google review manipulation, unsafe and unsanitary workplace practices, discriminatory treatment of staff, and systemic abuse of the temporary foreign worker program.
We don't have any control on the pest, right? That if it goes over there right now.
They don't control the cockroaches, you know?
We do like have the pest control over here, but we don't have a control.
Tim Hortons, once seen as a cornerstone of Canada's identity, has taken a turn that's raising serious questions about what it stands for today.
Tim Hortons is not really Canadian anymore. Hasn't been in quite some time, despite cloaking itself in the maple leaf and Canadian nostalgia. It has not been Canadian for years. Tim's is owned by Restaurant Brands International, a massive multinational conglomerate created when Burger King bought Tim Hortons in a $12.5 billion deal.
What used to feel like a symbol of everyday pride has shifted into something far more corporate, far more profit-driven, and honestly, far less connected to its roots. This isn't just about coffee anymore. It's about how a familiar brand can change when big money steps in. What if the Tim Hortons people grew up with isn't really the same company anymore?
However,
The official opposition renewing a call to axe the temporary foreign worker program.
I'm sorry, I can't believe that there aren't Canadians across the country that won't do these jobs.
This after CBC News revealed coffee giant Tim Hortons is pushing to hire more temporary foreign workers, or TFWs.
So, did you tell your colleague Patty to take a flying leap when she said that Tim Hortons should get more temporary foreign workers after the jobs numbers came out last week? Like, why aren't those jobs going to Canadian workers? And why are you guys kowtowing to Tim Hortons?
In a massive $12.5 billion deal, Tim Hortons became part of Restaurant Brands International, a global corporation backed by 3G Capital, the same group tied to Burger King. That move shifted the company from a national icon into a piece of a much larger international business strategy where financial performance takes center stage.
Tim Hortons is lobbying Carney for more foreign workers, more temporary foreign labor, more pathways for non-Canadians, while Canadian teenagers right now are struggling to find their first job.
All the familiar branding, the hockey culture, the roll-up promotions, the cozy image, it still exists, but now it feels more like a carefully managed identity rather than something deeply rooted in the local economy. Behind the scenes, decisions are being shaped by global investors focused on efficiency, growth, and returns. And then comes the labor side of the story, and this is where things get uncomfortable.
In late October, it held lobbying meetings with Liberal, Bloc Québécois, and Conservative MPs, making the case to renew expiring work permits faster, according to former Immigration Minister Marc Miller. The Bloc's Alexis Brunel-Duceppe says in July they were looking to raise the existing cap on TFWs in his riding from 10 to 20% of employees.
At a time when many young people are trying to enter the workforce and gain basic experience, entry-level jobs have become more competitive than ever. These were once the kinds of roles that helped people get started, learning responsibility, building routines, earning that first paycheck. But instead of expanding those opportunities locally, Tim Hortons has, in some cases, supported policies that allow for more flexibility in hiring through programs like the temporary foreign worker system.
It's actually very predictable that they would request higher caps, higher ability, easier ability to hire temporary foreign workers. I'm not surprised at all.
But caps are not the main concern for this professor. She says foreign workers are prone to exploitation by employers, and that's where Ottawa needs to act.
From a strictly economic perspective, this can lower labor costs and help businesses maintain consistent staffing levels, but it also changes who gets access to those first job opportunities. This isn't speculation, it's part of documented corporate advocacy aimed at shaping labor policy in ways that support operational needs.
A few years ago, Tim Hortons got caught in a political firestorm over Canadian energy. They were running ads from Enbridge, a major Canadian pipeline company, in their stores. And when fancy environmentalist activists complained about the ads, Tim's caved. Just like that. They pulled the ads after an online pressure campaign, bending the knee to anti-oil activists instead of standing by one of Canada's largest employers.
And while that may make sense from a cost efficiency standpoint, it raises real concerns about how those decisions ripple through the local job market. For many young people, that first step into employment matters. It's not just about income, it's about experience, confidence, and learning how the working world operates. When those entry points become harder to access, the long-term economic impact can quietly build over time, and the decisions don't stop there.
A company built on Canadian identity, turning its back on Canadian energy workers because foreign-funded activists on the internet got loud and snivelly and won.
Tim Hortons has also had to navigate complex economic pressures tied to energy and public perception. At one point, the company's advertising included references connected to Enbridge, signaling an alignment, however subtle, with Canada's resource sector. That industry represents jobs, infrastructure, and a major piece of the national economy. But when public pressure grew online, the company adjusted quickly. From a business perspective, that kind of response reflects how brands manage risk and protect market share in a fast-moving digital environment.
Tim Hortons' reputation is in the absolute gutter. It was a Canadian institution. Now it's not. Canadian owned, Canadian staffed, and barely Canadian supplied. So when you look at, this is, again, indicative of Canada being hollowed out by one of our most beloved institutions, clearly run into the ground.
At the end of the day, this isn't just about one company. It's about how large corporations evolve when they scale globally. Economic priorities shift, strategies change, and sometimes the connection to local identity becomes a lot more complicated than it used to be. The ads disappeared just like that. No pushback, no explanation, no attempt to stand firm, just a quick corporate pivot the moment things got uncomfortable. From a business standpoint, it looked less like strategy and more like risk avoidance at full speed. For a brand that built its image around national identity,
some trouble for Timmy's. Federal and provincial watchdogs saying Tim Hortons' mobile ordering app violated the law by collecting location information from users. The investigation conducted by the Federal Privacy Commission found those who had downloaded the Tim Hortons app had their locations tracked and recorded every minute of the day, even when the app was not open.
Stepping away from industries tied to jobs and infrastructure raised serious economic questions. Entire sectors that contribute to employment and regional economies suddenly found themselves not reflected anymore in the messaging. And the shift didn't go unnoticed. Many people started asking why a company so closely tied to everyday routines would distance itself so quickly from parts of the economy that support thousands of livelihoods, especially when those decisions seemed influenced by outside pressure campaigns rather than internal economic priorities. Here's where things get even more complicated. Some of those campaigns were linked to organizations operating beyond Canada's borders, groups with their own funding sources and priorities.
That's what we saw with Tim Hortons. They partnered with a data broker that was willing to do business with them, and then they started sharing all this private personal information about their customers with third parties, which is completely unacceptable.
From a purely economic lens, that creates a strange dynamic. External influence shaping how a major domestic brand positions itself within its own market. So now you've got a global company structure, international investors, and external advocacy pressures, all intersecting in decisions that impact local industries. That's not just branding anymore, that's a layered economic story with real consequences. And just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more intense, another issue surfaced. This time, it wasn't about jobs or messaging, it was about data. Millions of users downloaded the Tim Hortons app, expecting a simple rewards experience.
Coffee, that it goes bad. Can you tell us about that?
The coffee is always expired. 9 out of 10 is expired, especially in the afternoon, and you can see that by the pot. It's flashing blue, that's meaning fresh. Green or yellow, it's meaning fresh. Red is dead, like just die. It's not flashing, it's been an hour.
But behind that convenience, concerns were raised about how user data was being handled. Investigations later confirmed that the app collected location information more frequently than many users realized, sometimes even when the app wasn't actively in use. Regulators, including Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, reviewed the situation and found that the data practices did not fully align with the company's stated commitments. From an economic perspective, data is valuable. It drives marketing, improves targeting, and boosts efficiency, but it also comes with responsibility. And when that balance isn't handled carefully, trust takes a hit.
One of the time I told one of the managers, I said to one of the employees, he put his fingers in his nose, twisted, and he started making special cheese. He started making the cheese. So congrats to all the 100 customers, you are eating the special cheese. Cheesy.
The response, updates, adjustments, and public statements aimed at addressing the issue, but the bigger picture raised an important point. In a digital economy, user data isn't just a feature, it's an asset. And how companies manage that asset can directly affect consumer confidence. Inside store operations, another layer of pressure was building. Former employees described fast-paced environments where efficiency targets played a major role in daily decisions. In high-volume service businesses, speed and output are critical, but when those pressures stack up, it can create difficult trade-offs. There were claims that processes sometimes prioritize keeping operations moving over discarding unsold products quickly. From a purely economic standpoint, minimizing waste improves margins.
You thought you were supporting a Canadian icon. Turns out you're funding a global corporate machine that doesn't share your values, won't hire your kids, and hates Canadian energy.
But it also increases the importance of strong oversight and consistent standards. Even inspection systems, which are designed to maintain quality, were reportedly approached with a focus on short-term readiness rather than long-term consistency. That kind of behavior reflects how performance metrics can sometimes shape actions in ways that aren't always sustainable. And then there's the workforce itself, the backbone of the entire operation. Employees across various locations have shared concerns about workplace conditions, particularly around communication and support. In any large service network, labor relations play a huge role in stability and performance.
But I always complain about them like we are being treated differently. We are not feeling we are welcomed. And one time I told the general manager, I'm not feeling welcome out here. I said, sorry, there's nothing I can do for you.
When workers feel unheard or hesitant to raise issues, it can affect morale, retention, and overall efficiency. From an economic perspective, investing in workforce satisfaction isn't just ethical, it's practical. A stable, motivated workforce drives better service, reduces turnover costs, and strengthens long-term performance. When you step back and look at everything, the ownership structure, labor strategies, data practices, and operational pressures, it paints a picture of a company navigating complex economic forces in real time. And every decision, every adjustment carries weight far beyond just a single cup of coffee. When workers in certain locations tried to push back, tried to organize, tried to ask for even small wage increases.
I sent her a message over Snapchat asking her if she had a boyfriend, which she had replied no. She asked if she wanted an Indian boyfriend. And my niece's reply was, well, how old is he? And she said 25. And she said, well, I'm only 17.
I heard I could make $20,000 if I wanted to marry the manager's brother here. Can I start that process?
The response wasn't always cooperative. In some reported cases, franchise operators reacted by shutting doors and halting operations, effectively locking workers out during disputes. These aren't just random complaints. They're tied to documented labor disputes where employees were pushing for better conditions and a stronger voice in the workplace. From an economic angle, this highlights a growing tension between cost control and workforce expectations in high-pressure service industries. Tim Hortons built its image around being part of everyday working life, yet inside some stores, the relationship between labor and management became increasingly strained.
We're at the local Tim Hortons, which has been more aptly named Sing Hortons in recent months because franchise owners have really been taking advantage of the temporary foreign worker program, and specifically LMIAs, labor market impact assessments, which allow for the employer to receive federal government funding to hire temporary foreign workers. And they say they're doing so because they cannot find Canadians to fill that role.
That contrast alone raises serious questions about how brand identity and internal operations can drift apart over time. And it doesn't stop with employees. The franchise owners themselves have faced their own battles. After the takeover by Restaurant Brands International, a number of franchisees began raising concerns about how the system was being managed. Lawsuits emerged alleging that shared advertising funds were not being used transparently, and that additional fees were stacking up in ways that squeezed already tight margins. For many of these owners, this wasn't just business. It was personal investment. Some had poured their life savings into opening a location, trusting the stability of a well-known brand.
Rather than address a single question, they accused me of making very serious allegations without supporting evidence, warning that publishing anything they deem inaccurate could be considered libel, and stated that they expect full access to all of my investigative materials before they would even consider answering.
When financial pressure increased and communication broke down, disputes escalated into legal action across both Canada and the United States. From a purely economic standpoint, franchise systems rely heavily on trust and alignment. When that balance breaks, it can create ripple effects, impacting not just owners, but employees and customers as well. And then the situation took an even more serious turn. Investigations in certain areas brought forward allegations involving improper practices tied to immigration processes. Authorities looked into claims that individuals in positions of power at specific locations may have been involved in arranging fraudulent agreements connected to residency pathways. This moved the issue beyond workplace conflict into legal territory that required law enforcement attention. Police investigations were launched, and the focus shifted toward protecting vulnerable individuals who may have been placed in difficult situations. It's important to be clear, these cases were tied to specific locations and individuals, not the entire system. But from an economic and operational perspective, they exposed what can happen when oversight mechanisms fail to keep up with a large and decentralized franchise network. When monitoring weakens,
the evidence so that they can prepare damage control or perhaps scrub anything before publication. So I wrote back firmly but politely, and I resent every question word for word. Tim Hortons Corporate responded again that if I'm unwilling to provide the additional details that they would require to properly investigate, I can use the statement previously provided. That's when they launched into full PR parade.
Risks increase, and in rare cases, serious violations can occur without being immediately detected. At the same time, there have been repeated concerns raised by workers about fairness in day-to-day operations. Some employees reported that shift assignments, promotions, and responsibilities were not always distributed evenly. Instead, decisions were sometimes influenced by personal preferences, which created perceptions of unequal treatment within teams. From a business standpoint, consistency and fairness are critical for maintaining morale and productivity. When workers feel overlooked or treated differently, it can affect performance, retention, and the overall stability of the workplace. In a country that values diversity and equal opportunity, these kinds of concerns carry weight, not just socially, but economically as well. A workplace that doesn't fully utilize its talent pool risks losing efficiency and long-term growth potential. When you step back and connect all these points, the labor disputes, franchise tensions, legal investigations, and workplace concerns, it becomes clear that the challenges go far beyond surface-level issues. This is what happens when a company scales rapidly under global ownership, where financial targets, operational efficiency, and local realities don't always align perfectly. Each decision, from cost management to policy support, may make sense individually from a business perspective, but when combined, they can create a much bigger picture, one where the balance between profitability and local impact becomes harder to maintain. And that's the real story here. Not just a brand changing, but an entire economic model shifting in real time, where every move carries consequences for workers, owners, and communities connected to it.